The 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, West Germany, were the site of the Munich Massacre. It was a turning point in the history of both international terrorism and the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. The world was shocked by this horrible event, which also had profound and far-reaching effects on the Middle East, international security, and how people around the world think about terrorism. To fully understand the Munich Massacre, it is essential to look at the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the events of the killings, and what happened afterward, including Israel's response and the long-term effects on the world and the area. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Zionist groups began pushing for the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire. This was the start of the Israeli-Palestinian struggle. When the British Mandate for Palestine was set up after World War I, tensions rose between the Arab people and the Jewish immigrants who had come there. The UN's 1947 partition plan called for the creation of different states for Jews and Arabs, but Arab leaders turned down the plan. Israel became independent in 1948, which started the first war between Israel and the Arab world. Because of the war, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians had to leave their homes and find refuge in nearby Arab countries. Palestinian nationalist groups like the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, wanted to make a Palestinian state and fight against Israeli rule by the 1960s. When it was created in 1964, the PLO became the main body for many Palestinian groups, including Fatah, which is led by Yasser Arafat. During the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel took over the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The invasion made things worse for the Palestinians and forced more of them to leave their homes. After the Six-Day War, Palestinian terrorist groups turned to terrorism and armed struggle more and more to bring attention to their cause around the world. One of these groups was Black September, a violent part of the PLO. In September 1970, thousands of people were killed when King Hussein of Jordan cracked down on Palestinian militants working in Jordan. This event became known as Black September. Through high-profile acts of terrorism, Black September tried to get back at Israel for this loss and bring attention to the Palestinian fight. The Munich Olympics in 1972 were meant to show a new, democratic, and calm Germany. They were intended to be different from the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, which were held under Nazi rule. The Munich Games were called the Cheerful Games because they emphasized peace and openness. However, security was not very strict because the managers didn't want the Olympics to have the same militarized feel as the Berlin Olympics. The Israeli team at the Munich Olympics was made up of players and coaches from many sports, such as fencing, weightlifting, and wrestling. A lot of them saw the games as a chance to represent their country and fight on a world stage. Nevertheless, the group was also heavy with history, as many of the athletes were related to Holocaust survivors, or were the children of Holocaust survivors. The attack happened on September 5, 1972. In the early hours of September 5, 1972, 8 members of Black September broke into the Olympic Village, which was home to the players. It took terrorists in tracksuits and duffel bags full of weapons to climb over a fence and into the building where the Israeli group was staying. Elazar Halfin, a weightlifter and wrestler, Amitzur Shapira, a track coach, Kehat Shor, a shooting coach, Andrei Spitzer, a fencing master, Yakov Springer, a weightlifting judge, Mark Slavin, a wrestler, and David Berger, also a wrestler, were taken hostage. The terrorists wanted the release of 234 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, as well as Andreas Bader and Ulrike Meinhof, 2 German left-wing radicals who started the Red Army faction, or RAF. If their demands were not met, they said they would kill the prisoners. Talks and failed attempts to save the people. The West German government, led by Interior Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher and Munich Police Chief Manfred Schreiber, tried to talk to the terrorists while getting ready for a possible rescue effort. Prime Minister Golda Meir led the Israeli government that would not deal with terrorists. They had a strict policy of not giving in to hostage takers. This made things more difficult because the German government was pressured to end the crisis without more deaths. Throughout the day, talks went on, with the terrorists pushing back dates and making more demands. The German government agreed to let the terrorists and their hostages get to Cairo, Egypt, safely. They thought that the situation could be solved there. But this was just a trick to buy time for a rescue effort. Late at night on September 5th, the terrorists and their hostages were flown to Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base, where a Lufthansa plane was ready. The terrorists didn't know that the plane was just a fake, and German police snipers were stationed around the airport. The relief attempt, on the other hand, wasn't well planned or carried out. The snipers were not adequately taught or equipped, and the authorities did not work together well. When the snipers started firing, there was a gunfight. The terrorists killed the hostages and set off grenades inside the helicopters. All 11 Israeli prisoners, 5 of the 8 terrorists and 1 German police officer were dead when the fight was over. Aftermath and effects on the world. The Munich shooting had severe effects that were felt for a long time. The tragedy was a terrible blow to Israel, and the government promised to punish those who were guilty. In the years that followed, Israel began Operation Wrath of God, a secret effort to kill people who were involved in planning and carrying out the killing. Some people were upset and critical of the operation, which was aimed at Black September members and other Palestinian terrorists. The massacre brought attention to the Palestinian cause around the world, but it also led to harsh criticism. Some people saw Black September's actions as a desperate attempt to bring attention to the situation of Palestinians, while others saw them as an evil act of terrorism that had no justification. The massacre made the Israeli-Palestinian issue even more divided and made it harder to find a peaceful solution. The Munich Massacre also showed how easy it is for terrorists to attack foreign sporting events. Soon after the attack, there were many more security steps at the Olympics and other significant events. People didn't like how the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, handled the situation, especially how they decided to keep the games going after they were briefly stopped. The famous words of Avery Brundage, head of the IOC, "The games must go on," were seen by many as insensitive given the severity of the tragedy. Operation Wrath of God was Israel's answer. The Munich Massacre made Israel start Operation Wrath of God, a secret mission to find and kill the people who were behind the attack. Mossad, Israel's spy service, carried out the operation, which was aimed at Black September members and other Palestinian militants. Over the next few years, Mossad agents found and killed several people who were connected to the Munich Massacre. One of them was Ali Hassan Salameh, a top Black September agent. People had strong feelings about Operation Wrath of God, which led to discussions about the morality of killing specific people. Many Israelis supported the operation because they thought it was essential to fight terrorism, but others thought it was violent and would keep the conflict going. The operation also had unintended results, such as the killing of a Moroccan waiter in Norway who was wrongly thought to be a Black September agent. The Munich shooting changed the way people around the world think about terrorism, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and international security for a long time. The attack made Israel realize how important it is to be alert and have a strong security system. Israelis felt even more alone and vulnerable after the massacre because they saw it as proof that the rest of the world wasn't concerned about their situation. For the Palestinians, the massacre brought attention to their cause but also made harmful stereotypes stronger and made it harder to get support from other countries. Using terrorism as a strategy turned off many possible allies and made it harder to find a peaceful end to the war. The Munich attack also had a massive effect on the safety of everyone around the world. Following the attack, governments around the world started to take terrorism more seriously and made sure that significant events had stricter security. The killing was the start of a new era in which terrorism became a worldwide problem that needed everyone to work together to solve. Leave a legacy, and remember. The Munich Massacre is still a sad part of Olympic history and a stark warning of how sports, politics, and terrorism can all come together. Since the attack many years ago, people have worked to remember the memory of those who died. After years of pressure from the families of the victims and the Israeli government, the IOC finally agreed to recognize the victims publicly at the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. There has never been another event like the Munich Massacre in the history of terrorism or the struggle between Israel and the Palestinians. It showed how political violence can affect international events and how hard it is to fight terrorism in a world that is becoming more connected. The tragedy still affects people today, reminding us of how terrible war is and how important it is to work for peace and understanding. The massacre also showed how important it is for countries to work together to fight terrorism and how essential it is to remember the people who died in these kinds of violent acts.